Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon if you're on the East Coast. Thank you all for joining today. I appreciate you joining Leah and Mary and myself for this amazing webinar. We're going to have good discussions today. Hopefully you can see my screen here. So we are going to be discussing needle safety today, needle stick injuries, prevention, protection, and practice. We have Leah Hanson joining us. Everyone is very familiar with Leah Hanson. And then we also have Mary from University of Iowa, registered EEG and CNIM. She's an intraoperative neuromonitoring tech, very experienced, and we're going to have a great discussion with her today. Her title is Advanced Electroneurodynamic and Intraoperative Monitoring Specialist. So looking forward to all her insights. So there is Leah, Mary, and myself that we are going to be talking with you today over this very important topic that doesn't always get a lot of recognition in our field. Again, disclosures, myself and Leah. Leah is a clinical advisor, a consultant, and I am an employee of RhythmLink. And then our learning objectives. So we are going to be discussing today OSHA safety standards, as well as being able to recognize safety risks with needle stick injuries, and then applying best practices for the safe handling of those and the selection. And then as well as identifying correct needle placement in IONM cases. So accidental needle sticks and IONM. Needle stick injuries remain very significant across the healthcare setting in general, but also in intraoperative neuromonitoring. And while some are reported, it's very limited. I mean, I myself worked in the OR for many years, and I know firsthand from what I've seen and from colleagues that a lot of times these are not reported. Mainly the reason for the underreporting is because, you know, we're in busy cases. There may only be one of us, especially if you're working for a contracted company and you're not an in-house. And so I've worked both in-house and for company. And either way, as you all are aware, it's hard to get coverage. And so when something happens like this and you need to fill out an incident report, trying to get someone to come in and cover your case, because it can be very time consuming. And I think that's why a lot of reasons why the needle stick injuries do not get reported, especially if it is the IONM professional versus someone else in the OR room. Such as a nurse or a PA or something like that could also anesthesia that could get accidentally stuck with our needles. And they have a little bit better way of getting someone to come in and cover them. And then OSHA does not track IONM needle sticks. As everyone's well aware, our profession, unless you've had our services or know someone who uses it, there's a lot of people out there that don't really know about us in neurodiagnostics. So OSHA does not track these. So that could be another reason why it is very underreported in literature, because it's hard to find. So there are over 30,000 accidental needle sticks reported per year in the US and IONM. And needle sticks are severely underreported, as we all know. So I know a lot of people chose 10,000. I probably would have chose 10,000 too, knowing how underreported it is. We did research, and down at the bottom of the screen, we do have where we found this data at. Out of those that were reported, they were serious risk to health for both the patient and for the patient and staff. So bloodborne pathogens were probably involved when we think about the serious risk of health. And that could have been why that number was reported. And if there wasn't a chance of the bloodborne pathogen, then maybe somebody didn't bother with reporting it. And that, again, as I was speaking a little earlier, that we know these needle sticks interrupt the workflows due to all of the instant forms that we need to fill out, and we need to go get seen by employee health, or go some places. The policy is you go to the ER, and then of course ERs have tremendous wait times. So it disrupts the patient care, and it also adds cost. And the cost of testing and of the staff and the downtime, especially if it is a bloodborne pathogen positive patient and medications are going to have to be administered, then this runs into tens of thousands of dollars. And I've spoke with like directors of employee health that I'm colleagues with and have worked with over the years, and they have shared how expensive this can be for the facility when this happens. So, did you know, and we have another poll here that popped up. So, are you aware of the OSHA Needlestick Safety and Prevention Act that was passed into the law in 2000? President Clinton signed it. So that means I came into the field in 2005. It was 5 years before me. And I will share with you, I have never heard of it until just here a couple years ago. So it looks like, the majority also have not heard of it.
Yeah, so it looks like 62% have not heard of it.
Very good. So the Needlestick Safety and Prevention Act, as I said, and you can get a copy of this on PubMed, and also go to the OSHA.gov website. And so this was signed into law on November 6, 2000 by our President Clinton at the time. And it became effective as of April 18th in 2001. And what the Needlestick Safety and Prevention Act states is that if there's a way to use a protective device, then it should be considered and looked at for the safety of the employees. And so when you look through this, again, IONM's not mentioned here, just because, again, as I mentioned previously, not a lot of people know about us. But it definitely, if you think back about it, so that's when everything started coming into play. When I'm older, I don't know if you remember back in the day when I was younger, when you would go to the doctor's office or the hospital and they would draw blood, and then they were trying to recap that needle that they had just used on you, or they set it aside. Well, after this act came into effect, like you started seeing a lot of those safety mechanism devices where they pulled the needle out and it immediately recapped at the end. Anesthesia, nursing, they all started using a lot of safety devices. So it was back then that a lot of those started coming out. And what this means for IONM is that if you have a safety device, if there's one out there on the market, then you can definitely take it to the facility where you work, and you can share that information so that they can review it and they can take a look at it and see if that's going to be best practice for your workflow and for the workflow of everybody, all the colleagues in the room that you work with. Like I said, nursing, anesthesia, scrub techs, the PAs, the surgeons, even those ones that get pulled into the room might be environmental services that were like, hey, we're going to flip this patient. We need help. And, we're getting people to come in and kind of help flip. And they're not familiar with the case. They're just coming in to help out. And you really want to make sure that no one's going to get stuck. I know when I was in the OR, I used to always holler, I'll grab the legs, and I would have all my wires and stuff down there and try to protect everything. And I would do a call out right before we flipped, when we were getting ready to count, that there are needles from head to toe. So everybody in the room was aware. That way, if we did grab somebody in that wasn't necessarily part of the case, familiar with the case, or going to stay in the case, they at least knew as we were flipping or positioning. Also, I think we have another poll popping up. Yep, there we go. Do you know what an IFU is? And do you know where to find it? So again, I can speak from experience after all my years in the field. I knew there was a piece of paper folded up with every device that is ever used, whether it's mine or someone else's in the OR. But I wasn't quite sure. I didn't know it was called an IFU, and I wasn't quite sure what that meant. If you attended any our webinar last month at the end of April, you heard about the EEG lab, where we also talked about these IFUs. And they come with everything you purchase. I mean, even if you go purchase a microwave, you're going to get an IFU for it. So it appears here that the majority, there is quite a few that they don't know what an IFU is, but we do have some that do. So it looks like 65% do not know what an IFU is, and 35% are aware of what an IFU. So it is an instructions for use. And it comes, like I said, with every piece of medical device, medical equipment, and that's what our needles and electrodes are. And I know Leah also, shares a lot of information with me about this.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest takeaways for understanding that instructions for use is it certainly isn't going to tell you at all how to do your job. It's not going to tell you how you're handling that product. It might allude to how you should not handle it. I mean, it might say things like, it'll say things like don't recap or, things like that Sara already mentioned. But if you haven't looked at that instructions for use on any of your products, it'll either be like in the box, in the packaging that you receive. You can also find it online from that manufacturer. But really take a minute to look through it and read it, because this is where the device manufacturer is required to dump all of their information for you. So, if you're wondering, there's a new scan that's going to take place in this OR suite today that I've never participated in. There's some imaging, there's some technique going on. And you might want to know in your IFU for the product that you're using, is there any conflict, risk, that kind of thing with compatibility of my product and this new innovation happening in this case or in this service or in this suite? And where you're going to find that, or where you won't find it, is the IFU. And what I mean by saying you won't find it, if it's not mentioned, that typically means that there's potentially no information on it from the manufacturer. Because as manufacturers, we can't test everything. We can't put that product through every single tiny scenario that you might have clinically. But in order for the FDA approval process, there has to be testing sort of widespread of normal standard activity. So, you might have, someone ask the question, is there any, we've all kind of had it. You'll be in, on the edge of the room and someone asks a question about the leads or the compatibility of materials with the leads or whatever the question might be from the table. And it's your job not to maybe know every detail every moment, but it's your job to know where to go get it. So that instructions for use is where you go and get it. And if you don't find the answer there, then reaching out to that manufacturer is where you go get it, because then they have to give you a yes or a no, whether or not they know that information. And, like for instance, you've got a suite that's got an integrated MR system. So for MRI, you've got to know if your devices that you're using on that patient are approved and cleared for MR. And it is going to say it clear as day in that IFU. If it doesn't say it, it is not. There's an assumption it's not. And if you're not sure, call the vendor. But again, if it's not in there, it's not. So I would really familiarize yourself with those documents. You don't have to, kind of read it every single time, but knowing where it is, knowing where to find it, knowing who to ask if you can't find it really takes the responsibility of those details from you as the responsible person in that moment to sharing it with that manufacturer and getting the right answer where it needs to be.
Thank you, Leah. That's a great call out. And I was going to mention that too. I know the last OR position I held, IONM position in the OR, we did a lot of hybrid OR suites, hybrid MR suites. And so it's becoming more and more common out there. And so this is where that instruction for use, as Leah was pointing out, is going to come in. And if anything else, just call that vendor and ask that vendor. I used to reach out all the time to colleagues and be like, hey, because I thought that little piece of paper, I'll admit it, I thought it was going to tell me how to do my job, and I didn't need to read it. I already went to school for this. I was registered, so it just went in the trash with the box and the packages and everything else. So it's really important to have this. And the other thing I want to let you know is definitely when JACO walks into those facilities, make sure you know where you can have this available to pull for them if they ask for it, whether it's an electronic version, it's a hard copy version, it doesn't matter, but every product has one, and you should have one available for every product if JACO walks in that door and wants to look at it, as well as any other department that may be doing an investigation because of a needle stick injury. And so our next slide here, when something happens, so say I get stuck or my colleague gets stuck and we got to fill out an incident report now. One of the things when you call the manufacturer or the vendor or your sales rep or whatever to report this, because you're going to need to get information from them, is the lot number, and where do you find that lot number? In the OR, over my many years of working, whether it's epilepsy surgery, IONM, whatever, every product that comes in there gets tracked. Every device, especially if it's placed in the patient, has a tracking number, a lot number, and it's recorded. I'm sure you've all seen the charge nurse up there. They're scanning like they're at the Walmart grocery store, right? They're documenting everything. We do not track any of this. When I was the manager of a lab, we had started right before I left, starting to electronically track some things so that we would have them. But I'm not aware of anyone in our field. If someone is, kudos, great to you. And please share that information, how you're doing it, because I think more of us in the field need to start tracking our supplies that we use, our medical devices, so that if needed, we can always come back and we can use that. And whether it's because of a needle stick injury, maybe it's because something happened, the needle broke, or anything like that. The electrode fell apart, if it's a cup electrode or a web or something like that. So most vendors will take this very seriously. I know we do, and we go back and investigate and do an investigative report. And we also have like an incident report we fill out, the same as what we do in the hospital as a clinician. And so we want to hear about these things. We want to assist you and help. And every vendor and manufacturer should be doing the same. So if you have any ideas, all those young ones out there that are very tech savvy, I would love to hear ideas on how we can start tracking these lot numbers and product numbers and stuff that we use regularly, so that when you go up to a patient's room and you've thrown everything away, but now all of a sudden you need this, you have a way to go back and find it. And I'm just showing right here with the circles and the arrows where you can find some of that information. The same, like I said earlier, when you purchase that microwave or any other device, and it has those serial numbers and stuff on it, and you have to call because your microwave's not working, or whatever home appliance or device you purchased, and the manufacturer is going to want to know that information. So now that we kind of went through some of those basic things, I want to go ahead and I want to start talking about our IONM cases, those things we all love. And so some things to kind of keep in mind and consider. I know I always did when I was doing a case or I was training students or a new employee, and just kind of what case type are we going to be doing? What modalities were requested to be monitored? And then also, was there something that wasn't requested that, I think that maybe I should let the surgeon and the team know that we can monitor it. Depending, we all have different surgeons out there. Some are very knowledgeable of IONM and some not so knowledgeable. So maybe they don't know that you can record recurrent laryngeal nerve when they're doing an ACDF, especially around C4-5, area. So offering that. And if they say no, then, you just document, was offered and, declined. So that it's documented in there, especially for legality issues and to cover yourself in case something was to happen and it was to go back and get reviewed. But definitely, we all know that the physicians at the end of the day, they have final say. So making sure that you document what was requested, what you're monitoring. If you're not monitoring it, just kind of why you're not monitoring, was declined. And then are you going to be doing pre and post flip data? Like this is a safety concern because if you're doing pre and post flip data, then that means you've got to definitely make sure you got everything, not just inserted, all the subdermal needles inserted, but they're also plugged into the equipment so that you have time to run those baselines. That means everybody's going to have to just hold off and wait a second, which we all know not everybody likes to do in the OR, because they're always waiting on us and IONM. And then you're going to have to unplug possibly from the equipment. I did learn a few tricks along the way that sometimes I didn't have to do that. And but needless to say, you've got to figure out some way to safely then flip that patient so that then you can run that data again. And especially maybe you're having a case that involves later in the day doing an anterior posterior flip. So maybe it's not pre and post flip data to start the case, but maybe later in the case, it's going to be that anterior posterior. And then also one of the facilities I worked at, we had built some new hybrid OR rooms that had imaging. So the MR suite was in the middle of two of our rooms, a cranial and a spine room, one on each side. And so we had a needle count sheet that we did that we made just for IONM. So we could pull all those out and count them. So we knew everything we had that was not MR safe was not going into that room before they slid that patient over there, because the patient's still asleep, still intubated, and all of that. Also, recording and stimulating sites, just kind of knowing what you're using. Are you using needles? Are you using sticky pads? Where am I going to place them? What's my recording? What's my stimulating? How long of a lead wire do I need? Where am I setting my cables up at? Can I set my cables up before the patient comes in the room, or do I need to wait because it's a cranium and they're going to spin the bed and that kind of thing? So just all things to think about.
Hey, Sarah, I'm going to add one thing to that as well. That counting, I think, is so critically important. And also count your covers, the needle covers. When the manufacturers manufacture the needles, there's commonly, as we all know, like a little cover on that needle from a safety perspective for the user when you first open and you first pull open that Tyvek pouch. And that cover that you've removed to be able to insert your product, count that as well, because there have been in cases where those covers get lost somewhere, and some of the covers actually can be seen in X-ray if it falls into the surgical site. Some of them, have a little tint. They might be on the floor, that kind of thing. But it's something that it's something that you kind of do, I think, when you're just like in your process of of counting and doing all your work. But every now and then there is a report of a cover that gets lost. So add that to the mix as well. Make sure you know, and also make sure you know the materials of that cover, because if that cover can help you find it, if indeed there's one that's missing, sometimes the cover itself, the design of it, can help you.
What a great call out. I love that, Leah. Thank you. I just learned something a few months ago. Earlier this year, I was with one of our reps, Kirk, presenting at NMA and talking to a bunch of IONMers, and found out. So how many of you know, I've seen products with the white cover over the needle. I've seen products with the blue. How many of you know why that cover is blue? Leah gave us a little bit of a hint, and I can't see the comments. So hopefully if anybody's saying anything, Max or Leah or Mary can help me out there. So I thought it was just because, it was a pretty color. I mean, I love blue. I thought that's what it was for. I'm going to admit, Leah. And I didn't always keep very good count of those. Go ahead, Mary.
Is it same as contact lenses? Same reasoning why it's blue?
So it's because it can be seen in imaging. Yes. If it was to fall in the wound, because how many times I can't even begin to count. I had a system where I had my wires, my subdermal needles tied up, ready to go and stuff. And I would pull them out of my package, put the package in my back pocket, pull the needle caps off, put them in my pocket here, and then place and tape and go. And I just had a really good system. But there's times when I had to crawl under the drapes, or I had to do something. And maybe before I got a chance to empty out all of those, because unfortunately I didn't know to count them, and I didn't count them. And I would bend over and all those would come out of my pocket. And then of course, the charge nurse would always tell me to make sure I get them all picked up off the floor. And I'd be like trying to get them after we got everything ready and positioned and go, and they're shutting the lights off to work. I'm, trying to pick all those up. But it's actually because if that was to have fallen and gotten somewhere it shouldn't have, then when imaging comes in, they can see that blue color in the imaging. And so I just learned that. I thought it was just because it was a pretty color, but there is a reason for everything. We just don't always know. We're always learning constantly. So a couple things I wanted to point out here, and I do have them here with me as well as in the slide. So, I guess it's not shown as well. So this is the old school neurotech reference guide by ORIM Tech. It was an IONM company. It is really great information, case by case, pictures, everything. And then this is the newer one. It's kind of hard to see in my picture, but it's blue. When I was at the last facility where I worked heavily in IONM, helping build a program, I reached out to FASET so that we could start getting these for our new hires and our students. And I carried it in my case. I carried it in my bag when I was a traveler for a contracted company. It is like a Bible to me. So, and anyone new, experienced, it's a very good resource. The next couple books here I want to call out. So this is a very good book too, The Intraoperative Neuromonitoring by Leftis, Biller, and Barron. Great information in here. Definitely pictures and talks about different cases, as well as on the left-hand side there, Dr. Morella Simon. So I have both her edition 1 book and her 2nd edition book. And they are amazing too. She has such great information over the years. And I know some of the schools, because I was having students even at the last facility I was at building a neuroscience program, Dr. Yamada's book. So he's got a blue one and a green one. Very, very good resources. I highly, highly recommend those books. So as we're getting ready for our case, we have a wide variety of choices. Same as I went through, like I said, at the end of April with our EEG lab. This is though for IONM, and we still have choices in IONM, just like they do in the EEG lab. So we have so many options and choices. So, and it doesn't matter what vendor you're using, but how do we decide? So I think about, where am I placing it? Am I placing it on the scalp, or is it going in an extremity in the body? Is it stimulating, or is it recording? And then also we've got different needle lengths and different needle. We got a bent needle, we got corkscrew needles, we got paired needles, we got single needles. We got paired needles that are twisted, and we got paired needles that are parallel. I have preferences that I like for all of them, and I can always explain why I like the ones I do. The parallels are easy to pull apart. If when I was working for a company and I had to split muscles, split needles, I could use that parallel, pull it apart instead of trying to untwist that, those twisty ones. Oh, they would just drive me nuts, because it wasn't real quick that I could do that. I was trained on corkscrews. I'm personally, not a fan. I've seen a lot of times, especially if somebody is coming in and helping out with a case, taking it over to relieve you, and the case ends, or maybe you're not the one on call for the night and you have the luxury of having somebody else take over the case. I have actually seen where the corkscrews were removed, and they weren't removed the opposite way of them being put in. And I've actually, unfortunately, seen where it's almost been pulled straight, and, chunks of hair are knotted and bloody and skin. So just not good patient, for the patient. I love bent needles. And if you're doing like an pre and post flip data, stuff like that, you can put them in upside down, they stay. And then when you flip, then you can pull them out because they're right side up very easily. They go in very nicely. Unlike back in the day when I didn't want to use the corkscrews and I kind of got off on my own after my training, I would try the singles straight. And, you really had to get those hubs to kind of come up and over with the wire. And then I had a mentor tell me that to staple them in, and that just, so I loved it when the bents came out. And then, we have small needles, 7 millimeters we can choose from. 13 is the normal size, all the way up to, 1922, which again, my last IONM job, we were really, looking at that. And sometimes I would use a subdermal for those ankles, posterior tibial nerve, versus a sticky pad, because I know not everybody in a contracted company sometimes can see the patient before the surgery. Working at a facility, I was definitely allowed to, and I would go in there and talk to them and put the sticky pads on, and I would actually see how big the ankle was with edema or something. And then I would automatically know that, I may not be getting anything. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time troubleshooting. Maybe I'll just go ahead and use a pair of needles, subdermals. So again, we have a wide variety, beautiful, colorful. You can pick out your own color schemes. When I was working for the contracted company, I got to make my own color scheme. When I went to work for a large facility and work with a team and build a team, we actually, because we were giving breaks and relieving each other or taking over, if you were the on-call person, we had to have a color system that everybody knew. So an excellent tech came up with a system for me. I admit, didn't know the color of the rainbows, so he made me Roy get back: red, orange, yellow, green, blue. And then we had all the blacks on with the color on one side and all the whites with the color on the other side. So just thinking of those things as you're setting up in or you're building your own team, as well as, yes.
Oh, is it okay if I jump in on that?
Yeah,
Do you mind going back
absolutely.
to the last slide?
No, absolutely.
So I don't know. I was supposed to introduce myself at the beginning. I was having some audio problems. But anyway, hi, my name's Mary. So I do intraoperative neuromonitoring with an in-house team, and also kind of taken the lead on some of the training for new people and in-house training for us. And I've been doing some kind of deep dives into EMGs specifically. Can you go back one slide where you have the different needle length? So this is one thing where I found in creating training materials for our in-house use is that we have this like huge dearth of IOM specific literature and research talking about like needle efficacy and like the effect of adipose tissue and other like non-homogeneous tissues that are subcutaneous and how that affects the signals. So what I've been doing is diving into the EMG side. There's a lot of research on this with limb prosthesis. They need to have a really clear EMG signal with the highest possible amplitudes, like root mean square amplitudes of the EMG signals. And kind of some cool numbers that I found more recently is the effect of fat translated into the amplitude reduction. So with it almost seems like a 10% amplitude reduction with every millimeter of fat added between where the signal's being read and where it's being generated. Up to a certain point, it's kind of on a curve, but then it levels off. Because the fat basically acts like an extra low pass filter on the system, except for it's coming from the biological side instead of the computer on our end. But I was reading a study recently and I jotted it down because I wanted to share they added 3 millimeters of fat and it turned into a like a 31% reduction in signal amplitude from the EMG side. 9 millimeters turned into an 80% signal amplitude reduction of the EMG signal, and then 18 millimeters of fat extra was a 90% reduction. So then if you're thinking about needles, and I call them the adiposity needles when my team orders the long ones. But if you're, for people who might not have the best signals, might not have the best signals with your MEPs, or if you're trying to limit, twitch with your stimulation, having that extra recording length to actually get closer to the muscle, even though it seems like, oh, it's not that much longer. This person's real fluffy, are we even getting to the muscle through all the adiposity, even if we're using the longer recording ones? Apparently it does really matter. Every millimeter counts when you're talking about whether or not to read that signal. And then also talking about the choice between like the sticky electrodes and the needle electrodes. We've had some outside vendors coming in. Specifically, they're vendors for our ortho spine team, and they've sold a couple of the surgeons on these EMG monitoring systems for T-lifts or X-lifts, something. I don't know. It's not something we're doing in-house, and it's kind of this new fancy thing that they've sold the surgeons on, but they're reading EMG off, they're reading motor action potentials with sticky electrodes on the surface. And I came across recently, we were doing some other training, I came across recently a very recent study trying to compare the efficacy of those surface electrodes versus the needle electrodes. And in that study, they had 26 cases where the needle electrode picked up the motor response. And of those, with the control side with stickies, 9 of those did not record the response. So the needles still seem to be winning out there, especially when you get into that adiposity issue, because with the with this surface stickies, even with prep, you know, you get crosstalk from nearby muscles or just too much attenuation that it's just not getting through. And now this was an IOM specific piece of research study, which, you know, they're few and far between for this stuff specifically that we're concerned with on the tech side. But I thought that was interesting how much the sticky electrodes were actually missing of the signal compared to the needles. And this was very self-serving because I'm kind of irritated that the surgeon decided to go with the outsource company instead of having us do it in-house. Anyway, those are kind of cool that I thought you all might be interested to hear. Anyway, thank you.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you, Mary. I appreciate you sharing that as well as I'm sure everybody else does. And hopefully you can share those where we can get that information and review that. I think that was excellent info.
Yeah, I can throw some links in the
And then just kind of going over here, I like to make things up so that I can remember them. So for instance, my SSEPs, I plug them in as TUMs, tib, ulnar, median on my stem boxes, and just kind of going through. And so this was some workflows that, you know, we used, I helped make, and just, you need to find what works best for you and your teams, and figure out what you need to do so that you can have those workflows and have them written down, especially if you're building a program. But even if you're on your own for a contracted company, then you still, like, it's nice to have everything written down and know. Also, correct, proper placement of stimulating and recording leads matter. So early on in my career, I did go through neurodiagnostic school, got my registries through ABRET. I worked for a company and I was trained to just kind of do itsy bitsy spider, you know, for my motor and SSEP leads. And then later on, when I was helping build an IONM program, our amazing medical director, who actually trained under Dr. Morella Simon, she could do everything that we could do in the IONM fellowship she went through at Mass General under Dr. Simon. And so she brought to my attention, why are we not measuring and marking for the motor leads and the SSEP leads? And I said, well, you know, it's not typically done in IONM. And she said, well, we're going to start doing it. And man, what a difference. I can speak personally that made. And so again, I know, like, sometimes when I worked for a monitoring company and was contracted, we weren't always allowed in to see the patient ahead of time and stuff. So that may or may not be something, but keep that in mind when you're troubleshooting, making sure that everything that is supposed to be stimulating is correctly placed and everything that is supposed to be recording is correctly placed, because it will make a difference in your data. And then just kind of throwing out there some upper extremity muscles. I know we used a lot where I worked at, but again, I have had other jobs where we had to split muscles. So if you're doing upper extremity, there's a whole list of muscles here that you can use. And then the different needle types that you can use. And you can see those pretty blue radiolescent caps on those ones there. And those are, as Leah said, we need to keep track of. And then some considerations too, when you're placing those subdermal needles, like, is your muscle a wide muscle, such as in deltoid here on this picture? And these pictures are from the Bible, the IONM guide or Bible that I talked about, the ORM tech that can be purchased from Asset now, versus the forearm EDC, and that where you have a thinner muscle. So for instance, I personally, I place in the thicker muscle there, deltoid. I would go ahead, if you can see, I do the two side by side. But for EDC here, I would find that muscle and then I would place one and directly behind it. Again, you want to make sure though you're putting spacing. No matter what way you place your needles, you're not right on top of each other or right side by side or next to each other. You don't want the needles to touch at all. Lower extremity muscles, again, used for monitoring. This is really where the needle length will definitely come in. We started using longer needles at the job I was working at because for those bigger patients, even myself, like if I'm trying to place vastus lateralis, vastus medialis in my thighs, I have thicker thighs, bigger thighs with the adipose that Mary just talked to us about in those research articles. And so you're going to want to use the longer needles to get down to my muscles and get good responses, because that's the whole name of the game. One, we do 99% troubleshooting, and two, we want to make sure the patient has no deficit, regardless of what could cause it. So we want to make sure that whatever they went into that OR room and our data looked like, they come out with either the same or better, but not worse. Some muscles here for the lower extremity, whether you're splitting them or doing pairs individually, as well as, again, another example of, gastroc muscle, medial gastroc, nice big muscle there. Can't miss it. Can put your needles in whatever way you choose and still be in the muscle for the most part. And then abductor hallucis, much thinner muscle. I've seen all kinds of techs place needles in different ways, and you may be missing the muscle entirely. You may be going along the edge of it. So it's just very, very important to be mindful of how we are placing these and teaching new ones.
Oh, sorry. I just threw another link. My video. There we go. I just threw another link in the chat to a really good resource for, and again, this is from EMG specific, but it shows correct kind of like your targets for getting the belly of the muscle and the EMG needle angling, which we usually go for 45% angle, it's fine, but it also talks about the variability you might get in that, and
Yes.
kind of the keys for knowing that you are in the right spot. And they have videos. It's EMG-Atlas. It's in the chat, and I put those other articles in there too. But it's a really good, easy one, especially people starting out, and it hits the kind of the big three on the EMG side. They say superficial, easily palpable, and then readily identified, which just translates right over for us.
Thank you, Mary. So, and I have here a couple videos just kind of showing, I'm demonstrating how I place. I put the paired needles, the two needles in between my pointer finger and my thumb, and I kind of place them. And then I do the S stress loop that Brett Netherton and I wrote articles about, and how to tape them down and hold them. And then as well over here on the other side, our safety needle. We actually have a demonstration because, it's always about time. How long is it going to take, And so Mary here demonstrated for us her technique and how she's mastered this with placing the safety needle very quickly, not taking her any time at all to make sure that she has the safety needle placed, because we place a lot of needles. And we have to make sure that we're efficient and that we're, going in the correct places, and we're expeditiously moving along so no one's waiting on us and that sort of thing. And then our next slide here, just kind of showing again that thin muscle, where and how to place that. And they're using a safety needle. And then some muscle placement for the face, cranial nerves. These came out of the books. And then the safety needles are really great for this. And this is kind of being shown here. And I know we're running low on time and we've got some more things. So I just wanted to kind of go through here quickly. You can pick between a paired needle and the needle length, as well as a fixed distance safety needle now. So they come in 2.5, 1.5 meter lengths, all needles. And then now there's a fixed safety needle. And just kind of that snapback feature.
I would just the first time I saw this paired fixed distance needles, my initial response, and I just want to share this because I did try this and I will save you the pain. I was like, oh, that's too close. So close together, you know, because we try to get 2 centimeters apart for the bigger muscles. I actually stuck one of these in my own eyebrow. It does read well enough for those small muscles. And because I wasn't about to use it on a patient. I had a colleague try one of these on a patient. She's like, I don't think these read very well. I was like, okay, well, is it because, you know, the signal, like, you know, it was a triggered response or whatever. She's like, yeah, we didn't really get anything. I was like, all right, is that the needle, or is it canceling each other out with that distance, or is it just there was no response? And so I did try it, and they do read the facial muscles pretty well, so you don't have to stab your own face. You're welcome.
Yes. And the fixed distance is definitely for like facial cranial nerve versus, you know, you wouldn't use that in your tib or your gastroc to record a motor response.
And the one thing I want to mention about, you know, those last couple slides that Sara, you just showed, is that, you know, as we talked about, there's a bunch of different strategies that a person can use to kind of protect and enhance that safety aspect of the needle. Because, you know, we saw all these pictures of these beautiful straight needles that have, like, frankly, nothing designed in it to be able to help us have that product be safer for not only whoever's using it, but also the medical team, the patient, you know, all of that. But, you know, we talked about that initiative back in 2000 that was enacted in 2001. This kind of thing wasn't around. There wasn't a design that was available in our industry that protected that needle. That needle that you see on the screen is one that was actually developed by a group at MUSC. Jess Barley and Dr. Edwards saw a problem of accidental needle sticks. They worked with a group at MUSC, which is basically like an innovation accelerator group. So they take these ideas from clinicians and they try to make it into something real that actually is a real product. Now, they don't, of course, do manufacturing. So that's why these groups have to partner with someone to manufacture and to do that piece of the work. But this kind of product is what you're going to start to see in bigger and better ways in our industry all the way around, because it's still that same needle that you saw in those pictures. It just automatically retracts. So when it's not inserted in the patient, it automatically retracts back into this casing that you see kind of on the far left. It's also got an option to be able to have sort of this, you know, bandage or this adhesive piece on top. And I don't know if you noticed, like on that banana or on the other pictures, there's no way for a surgical team member not to see that on the patient. So there's so many benefits to it. I mean, obviously the design itself, but then also the fact that it just physically is a bigger, noticeable, you know, format, so that everybody who's around is, you know, obviously more aware that that's a needle. And if that would get pulled out, so say it would get snagged somehow, as they always, you know, they obviously can do, it'll just retract back into its casing. And, you know, so and this kind of innovation also lends itself to using needles in all kinds of other places of our industry, which is a whole different presentation. But I mean, this enters into any place that you might want quick, fast, very accurate, good recordings without having as much risk associated.
Thank you, Leah. Yes, I agree. And so for the last slide here, it was just, you know, make sure that you're placing everything correctly, that we're doing all the troubleshooting, and that's the, you know, highest percentage of our job is troubleshooting. So we want to make sure that we're, you know, doing everything we need to protect the patient as well as ourselves and our colleagues in the room. So I'm going to ask Mary, I know we're right at the end of the hour. I'm going to ask Mary and Leah to jump in and join me. And just a few questions, if anyone in the audience has questions, as well as I kind of wanted to ask Mary if she's ever had any use for the safety needle, if so, what cases, that kind of thing, so that she can kind of share with us and what her experience has been.
Yeah, so hi. So I don't, I'm not affiliated with the company, but I do use the safety needles. And there's a couple reasons that I like those, and I'm speaking for myself, not for my institution. Is the biggest reason that when we got a chance to trial some, that I was like, heck yeah, I will try those, is because I was kind of clumsy when I first started out, and I ended up sticking myself a lot, and it's kind of embarrassing. And even if it was just kind of getting ready, I'd be like, well, I touched that one and it went through my glove, so I guess I'm cutting it and washing my hands for a minute, and I'm gonna delay everything. So
We've all been there.
yeah, so that was one reason. Another reason was what I found out anecdotally, that one of our surgeons was chronically getting needle sticks off of people's arms because she liked doing pre-flip baselines for posterior cervical cases. And and a lot of times those the older folks with those like the paper skin, and just the way she was holding the patients, she just always ended up getting a needle stick. So I like the safety needles, and like the teams really like them upstairs. They're like, oh, what's those? Are those new? I was like, they've been around a while, but I'm the only one who wants to use them right now. And there have been a few times where it's, a stick has been avoided because there's a flying needle and someone has caught caught the safety side of it instead of the actual stick. And go ahead.
I think also it's important, like if someone on the team gets stuck, anesthesia, nursing and stuff, like I've had them ask me in the OR when it's happened, hey, is there any better way to do this? And we're always looking for better ways to do things. And I think, now we can say, yeah, there's a safety needle we can try. We can give it a try. Maybe it won't work in every situation or for, every case or every person, but it's something to definitely try.
Yeah. And we had, we have a couple of campuses. I'm trying to extend our ordering right now, to bring more of the safety ones to our secondary campus. Cause I did have an anesthesiologist who was pregnant get a needle stick when she was reaching under the drapes. I hadn't used them, and the patient was Hep positive. So she had a really stressful couple of hours while they were getting viral load levels sent to the lab for that patient. And it did end up, I found out the next day that it was undetectable, so her risk was low. But that was something that, having that safety thing could have been avoided. I don't want to sound like too much of a shill. I am very into safety stuff in general.
I've heard of other, you're not the first, Mary. I've heard of several others that have, heard of someone or seen someone in that exact scenario that's been shared with us. And Leah, you even know of a couple instances, correct?
Yeah, exactly. I've got, my son-in-law is a surgeon. And so we have this conversation all the time because every now and then he'll be like, oh, I got stuck. And I'll be like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Did you report it? And sometimes and he reported, he's like, it takes forever. And I'm like, I know. And so yeah, it's real life happening all the time. And I'll tell you, just for 10 seconds also, the place in our industry also outside of IONM, there's a place that could benefit from a design like this is trauma. You get somebody who comes in to an ER with trauma and you want to get quick, fast, rapid EEG going on that patient. You don't have time to wait, frankly, for, a full, beautifully applied EEG application. Sometimes it'd be great in 10 minutes, 5 minutes to get leads on. If you had a safety needle that you could insert into a few key areas on that patient. You don't know their background though, remember. Like in those cases, you don't have time to find out what they got going on. So it not only is something that is, of course, super critical in these kind of environments of surgery, but think about all the areas of our industry that are our products, if innovated in a way that could be more safe, could develop in areas where neurodiagnostics would become a conversation that everyone would know about. So yeah, not only in this field and continuing to kind of drive the reporting of it, as mentioned at the very part of the presentation, but also just the extension of this into other areas.
Absolutely. And Max, do we have any questions? I apologize. I'm unable to see any comments or questions.
Hey, Sarah. So a couple of questions, mainly just asking, will the presentation be accessible at a later time? Yes, it will be. We will share a follow-up link with all the articles that have been shared in this presentation today, as well as the presentation itself.
I think it was just a request for articles and
Okay.
recorded version.
Yep,
All
that's
right.
all I can see at the moment.
One thing I wanted to kind of chat about, it's kind of interesting what Sarah's talking about. She's like, oh, she hates corkscrews. I love corkscrews.
They're so medieval looking, Mary.
I know, and that's what my colleagues say. They're so evil looking.
Barbaric.
But the low impedances and the consistency, if you're doing constant voltage stimulation, not watching the current getting delivered rise so dramatically during a case and then being able to stim at the lower level. I really do love the corkscrews. I don't love so much sometimes that they can have like a pressure point at the point. This was something I was actually asking you guys about. It's like, can we get a little foam in there? But yeah, someone's in the chat saying incredible for scalp. Yeah, and it's like that's where they're meant for, is those stim leads. I have a case plan tomorrow, then I'm putting some in because they're gonna put an arm up here. I don't want those to get knocked loose.
And
But I do.
that's what
like
I love, Mary, is as techs, we have so many options to choose from, because I mean, I switched to bents and I got beautiful motor responses at 200 volts, so, you can really, I mean, that's what's so unique and special, is that each one of us we have so many choices to choose from and still get that quality data that we need. So yeah, I love it. Hopefully everybody enjoyed this. I don't know if we have any more questions, Max.
Did you have any more questions for me, or?
No, I know we're over on time, and I try to be very cognizant of everybody's time. I really appreciate Mary and Leah joining us. Did you guys have anything more?
No, great job, Sarah. Great job, Mary. Thank you so much to all the attendees who carved out some time to talk about this topic, because it's critically important and it's long overdue.
Yes.
And if anyone out there, like, don't be afraid to kind of do your own thing. These two are saying that like the safety needles that they have available did come from a team requesting them. And like, so you can always, if there's something that you're always getting yourself stuck, or you're always feeling like you're on the verge of a stick for something, like, don't be afraid to try something. I have an education background, so I'm always like, oh, let's try something new. I didn't like how close I always got to sticking myself placing external anal sphincters, so I ended up using foam and a Metapore to make something called the Four Horsemen that holds them in place. And there's always, it looks like this. I have one. I was prepping a case while I was listening. So, and it's just anything like that. These are just the paired straight ones put into a little foamy thing, and they go in super easy, and then you don't have to worry about making your tension loop right in a place where you really don't want to get a needle stick. So it doesn't have to be fancy, or if something, anything that can kind of help everyone not get stabbed and then have to do that mental calculus of, okay, what are the social factors of this patient? How old are they? How likely are they to have shared needles in the 70s? So,
Yes. Thank
you
you so
know,
much for sharing
don't
that,
be
Mary.
afraid of it. Don't be afraid to try something new, because I'm always a cheerleader for improvement and learning more, and hopefully you all can be too.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you all for joining us. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep partnering with all the tech colleagues out there. So thank you very much. And thank you, Mary and Leah. I really appreciate your assistance with this. So I hope everyone has the great rest of their, Wednesday.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, everybody.